Not like, beta, you go to Spiti, in 2 months, create whatever you want, come back, we'll publish your stuff. It's not the way it works. Wildlife photography is like हाथी के दांत. खाने के और, दिखाने के और.
Right.
You have to realize खाने का क्या है. And that is when you will be able to hone your skills to match that requirement. And if you can do that, you can really be successful as a wildlife photographer. Photography is not my passion. I treat that as my medium of expression.
AltC with JD is a podcast on alternative careers, sponsored by IIAD, the Indian Institute of Art and Design.
So thank you for tuning into AltC with JD. I am your host, Jay Datta. In today's episode, we have an award-winning wildlife photographer. He's walked with bears, he's swum with killer whales, and he's hung around with gorillas. He knows the tigers by the name in the natural habitat. Please welcome Jayanth Sharma. Jayanth is also the CEO and founder of a company called Toehold Photography, which helps organize excursions, photo trips around the world from Costa Rica to Serengeti to our own Tawang. I've had the pleasure of actually being with Jayanth in one of the trips in Ranthambore, where I just saw his deep love, not just for photography, but also for nature, our whole rich, interconnected planet. So please welcome to AltC, Jayanth Sharma.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jayanth. Thank you for your time. So Jayanth, wildlife photography, and how is that different from other forms of photography?
Right. So, like you mentioned, the photography aspect of it is definitely there. But what's perhaps more important is a passion for your subjects. So, let's say somebody is a portrait photographer versus a wildlife photographer. In wildlife photography, you need to know a lot more about your subjects. You need to have perhaps some empathy for the wilderness, for the environment, for wildlife. You need to know their concerns, their problems, their the beauty of nature and all of that. So I think wildlife photographers have an undercurrent passion and love for their subjects a little more than probably other genres of photography.
Right.
So I think wildlife photographers love wildlife,
Yeah.
and photography translates into just a medium of expression. So
Right.
that's, I think, one of the bigger differences between different forms of photography.
Right. And unlike portrait photography, your subjects are not going to be sitting still in one place.
And you can't love them as much.
So let's jump into the big question. How did this passion start? I mean, what's the backstory, Jayanth?
Right. So I come from a family of artists and creators. My father is an artist. He was a painter as well. He was a dramatist. My mother is a singer. So all throughout my childhood, I was always exposed to creative arts.
Right.
So I would not be disappointed if I didn't get 90 in math or science. I would be disappointed if I didn't get the first prize in a recitation contest or a music contest or a fancy dress contest or a dramatics role. So I was always born and brought up in an environment where creativity and creative arts was quite serious in the family. So it translated into different forms over time. And my father is a photographer.
Right.
So I was born and brought up in a studio. I played hide and seek in the dark room in the 80s.
Wow. Right.
So it was something which was an undercurrent, interest that was always there. And when I was in my early 20s, I realized my passion for nature and the wilderness.
Right.
And that's when I could quickly adapt to the modern camera world, which was now becoming a digital photography world.
Right.
And then I married the two worlds very fast, and I could see some early success because of that, because I didn't have to go through a lot of learning because we always had cameras. I always knew how to take photos, even in the studio as a child. I would sit in the billing box and bill people on, Dasara and Deepavali, when there used to be huge queues of people coming to take photographs of their, young girls in saris or, stuff like that. So I was always introduced to photography.
Yeah.
But I always keep reminding myself, and I've said this in a lot of places, including some TED Talks, that photography is not my passion.
Right.
I treat that as my medium of expression. So I realized, since I was passionate about nature and wildlife, I just used the camera as a tool to express my love. That's it. That's how it. I was also having the spare time and the spare cash when I was in the IT industry.
Right.
The Saturday Sunday offs was something which was very new to the Indian youth.
Right.
Otherwise, we were always used to the manufacturing industry where Saturday was a working day and Sunday was the only holiday.
Yep.
But here in the early 2000s, we were in the IT industry where after 5 p.m. on a Friday till 10 a.m. on a Monday, we are switched off from work.
Yep.
So what do? You start
Right.
indulging in different forms of interests. And for me, I started going into the jungle and I started liking it as much. And I also realized there were so many stories that I could tell.
Yep.
And the best way to tell stories was using photos. And I had the exposure to photography. So
Right.
it was just a organic marriage of all the worlds that I was involved with.
Okay, excellent. So you had a brief stint in the IT industry as well. So what was that, and at what point did you say, I'm going to switch full time into photography?
Right. So I was actually not educated to be in the IT industry. I was studying a stream of mechanical engineering called tool and die making.
Okay.
Just when I was about to finish my course, the IT industry erupted from nowhere. Here
Right.
we were, instead of sending letters, we were sending emails in the late 90s. And I was always interested in drawing, painting, and all of that as a child. So I saw a lot of opportunity in the IT industry, which probably paid a lot more than other industries I was used to.
Right.
And I could, again, this is exactly what I've been doing. If I think about myself, I married my interest in drawing and painting,
Yep.
and I got into graphic design and eventually web design because
Right.
I saw it just as a different form of art, or I could use my creative skills now using technology. I could adapt myself there.
Yep.
So suddenly I saw an opportunity in IT industry, and within no time I was a graphic designer, starting to learn HTML and stuff like that in my 20s, and soon became a web designer.
Right.
Eventually, I did have some exposure to UX design as well
Yeah.
by the time I moved out of IT industry. So I think I've always been somebody who adapts using my core skills of creativity.
Sure.
So right now it's photography. 10 years later, it could be something else.
Yeah.
But the foundation of everything I've been doing all my life has been stuff related to creativity. And also, since you are somebody who is an exponent of UX design, I must tell you my exposure to UX design in the early days when people used to ask what is UX design, kind of an era,
Right.
has been instrumental in my career as well, because here I was bridging the gap between technology developers and all of that, and art, creativity, design, and all of that.
Yeah.
So I found that role where I could understand somebody's code, and I could understand design, and I could
Right.
marry both of them. I
Sure.
use exactly the same thing in every form of my endeavor, including photography. I
Right.
understand creativity, I understand the business and usability and rationale and all of that.
Yep.
So I think it was a progression. So it happened over time because the foundation was creative stuff.
Excellent. So how long have you been in wildlife photography now?
I mean, as a hobbyist, it's been 20 years.
Right.
I started to get involved seriously in 2004.
Okay.
I bought my own camera and all of that in 2004. But I quit my IT job in late 2007, early 2008.
Right.
And I've been on my own since then.
Excellent. So this is probably a good point to ask this question, which people or clarify the term which people get confused about: career, job, and calling. Given your journey in various different things, how do you decode that?
Right. Initially, when I started claiming to be a wildlife photographer and I was in the media a lot, every time I met a journalist, they would ask me questions which celebrated quitting the IT industry and doing something unique.
Right.
Deep within, I was not really convinced about celebrating that. While I may have done that, I
Right.
always was conscious of the fact that that is not something to celebrate, because honestly, even today, I am as much an IT guy as I was 15 years ago.
Right.
I still know what my responsive stuff is. I still know what my jQuery is. I still know a lot of things related to tech.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't think I can ever switch off that part of my life, because
Right.
remember, that's what has been my forte, using tech and all these things and adapting it to creative stuff.
Sure.
And if you ask me what was my initial success, I built my own website in 2005 when people were hardly understanding what a domain is.
Right.
I was having my personal website, and I celebrated my photos there, and it was like an early mover advantage for me,
Sure.
which helped me move into photography as a full time.
Right.
So I personally think moving careers is not something I kind of want to encourage so much to people, as long as they understand it's just a different flair of the same thing. I may be using a camera versus a mouse, but
Right.
what I'm doing, I don't see too much of a difference between them. To be honest, I don't even see myself as somebody who was liberated from the computer and came to the world of wildlife and nature and holding a camera, and I feel this is a new life to me, because I
Yeah.
definitely use all that I was doing on a computer even now.
Right.
Maybe not as much as a 8-hour job will do, but I don't think I can switch off my tech aspect. I still work on my own website. I still know a lot of tech stuff. I think I just moved roles from one creative aspect to another.
Right.
The camera is as technically intrinsic field as, let's say, software or whatever,
Absolutely,
right? So
yeah.
many people think camera is a creative tool, but it can be a creative tool when the science of the camera is understood and it becomes second nature.
Sure.
You give a great camera to somebody, they just can't produce creative stuff without understanding the technology, the science, and all of that. So I
True.
think just the instrument has changed from a Dreamweaver to a camera,
Yeah.
but what I do is predominantly the same, just create stuff.
Totally. No, I was just going to say that because a camera, by in its inherent nature, is extremely technical.
Right.
So you just said it beautifully that it is still, you have to understand all of that. You're not escaping it.
Right.
You're essentially co-opting it.
True.
Right.
True. Absolutely.
Great. So what would you say is a typical week in the life of Jayanth Sharma?
Right. Jayanth Sharma is not a typical wildlife photographer, because I actually, again, here also, I play the role of being an entrepreneur,
Right.
and of course, being known as a wildlife photographer. So I think 70% of my job involves being a businessman, being somebody who has to take decisions, who has to do administrative stuff, which is basically something which is not as known or as easy to understand in my profile.
Yep.
What's easy for people to assume is me holding the camera, walking the rainforest, taking pictures of some amazing stuff,
Yeah.
which definitely happens a lot. It happens about 150 days in a year,
Right.
but there's still 200 days a year where I need to be in my office looking after, let's say, GST returns, or could be marketing campaigns and their analytics, or could be just profiles of people I want to hire, or performance of people I've already hired, and stuff like that, which is a typical job for any entrepreneur, or let's say any management personnel.
Yeah.
So I think I enjoy my role because it comes with a lot of mixed responsibilities.
Sure.
Trust me, if you have to click pictures every day for 30 days in a year, you will probably get bored of that too.
Right.
So, which is the same with every profession. There's no profession where you don't feel the boredom. You will feel boredom at times. That's when
Yep.
you need to, find ways in which you can keep the spark on, where you
Right.
can do different things in the same industry or in the same job.
Sure.
For me, it's thankfully someday I'm learning about financial reports. Someday I'm learning about a new digital marketing strategy. Someday I'm learning about how to edit videos in different way. Someday I'm updating my Lightroom skills.
Right.
So for me, it's a beautiful mixture of many different roles that
Yeah.
I chose to play. So a typical week is depending on where I am. If I'm in Bangalore, it's in the office.
Right.
I could be managing, plans for next travel. I could be managing website work, marketing work. I do a lot of these kind of things apart from just clicking pictures.
Sure. Yeah.
But when I go travel, like for example, tonight I'll be out for a month.
Right.
I'll be in South America. The whole of this month, I'll be getting up early, going after subjects like pumas or hummingbirds in the rainforest. And with a short break in the middle of the day, work resumes again after 3 or 4 in the evening,
Right.
goes on till sunset. And in some places, post dinner also, we may get out to photograph nocturnal animals like insects and frogs and snakes and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I make sure there's a very good balance between my desktop and
Yeah.
my field work.
Right. No, that's excellent. On that note, what's your favorite animal?
It has to be a polar bear. I don't have any doubts about that.
Right.
I enjoy photographing and also looking at polar bears in the high Arctic.
Right.
I love going to the polar regions. and an area there called Svalbard,
Right.
which is what I feel is one of my most favorite destinations. I'm looking forward to that place again in July.
Excellent. And that's where you stay on a ship and then keep taking
Exactly.
those expeditions out.
Exactly. It's a cruise. You're
Yeah.
on board for about 10 days. The ship keeps moving around in the archipelago, and we spot polar bears at a distance and take smaller boats we call zodiacs, and we go close to
Right.
them and hopefully enjoy photographing them in beautiful landscapes.
Fantastic. I mean, that's a great balance actually to have.
Right.
So, talking about that, looking back, what are some of your most cherished experiences, memories in this alternative career?
Right. So I think a lot of time I spend in the wilderness is really memorable. I keep telling my mother that a lot of my clients spend hundreds and thousands of rupees and dollars to witness things I do on a monthly basis. So I think I'm
Right.
fortunate that way, that I actually have a part of my profile where I do all these things. Perhaps not spending as much money as I would when I was in the IT industry. So I see a lot of this beautiful world.
Right.
So some of the moments I spend with animals and birds, and like for example, in the month of November, I was actually in Norway, diving with killer whales. So that's an adventure that I live for. It
Right.
brings a lot of satisfaction to my life. I keep saying that by the time I leave this planet, I should have seen as much as it is possible,
Sure.
and especially the natural world.
Right.
I'm also somebody who is deeply interested in heritage and culture and history. So
Right.
that is something I've kept for my post 50s.
Right.
While physical abilities are needed, I'd like to do as much wildlife and nature stuff as possible. So I have seen a lot of amazing stuff, from tigers, fighting tigers, to polar bears hunting, to jaguars, to pumas, to brown bears in Russia, as you said, the polar bears in Svalbard. So I think when it comes to megafauna, as we call it in the wildlife
Right.
world, have quite a lot of exposure to almost many big things that people crave for. I need to still see a Siberian tiger and an Amur leopard.
Right.
If I do that, my big cats of the world is almost done.
Right.
So I have done a lot of work in Africa. I have done a lot of work in South America. So I think it's difficult to pick some instances where I have had great, exciting opportunities. But every day is new. Every day is interesting. It could be
True.
a frog. It could be a tiger. It could be a whale or an elephant. Everything is interesting when they do some unique things. So I am living by the day, and I think every month, what's my favorite keeps changing,
Right.
because people ask me what's the favorite place you're going to. I say the next place I'm going to, because
Yeah.
that's going to be as good as anything else.
Totally. Totally. And have you seen the snow leopard?
Many times, many
Okay.
times. I have been working in an area in the Himalayas called the Spiti Valley.
Right.
It's in Himachal Pradesh. So we run photography tours to sight and photograph snow leopards as well. I
Right.
have myself been there many times, including 2020, 2021. 2021 I did, 2022,
Right.
because 21 was a lockdown. 22 was the last time I was there photographing
Right.
snow leopards in the mountains. It's an amazing experience. A lot of physical effort, exertion, and of course possibilities to be a little bruised by mountain sickness and all of that.
Right.
But if you sustain all of that, it's one of the heavenly places on the planet, the Himalayas.
Excellent. So the snow leopards do give you the run for the money.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely. It's very tough to spot
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
but if you spot them, they are there for a while.
Right.
So I remember in the last expedition I was there, I had a snow leopard with a ibex carcass. We had it for
Okay.
3 days. So from morning till evening, we would see the snow leopard non-stop.
Right.
So sometimes when you have the opportunity, you will get a lot of it.
Excellent. That's great. So now, obviously, to get experiences like that, there's got to be a lot of grunge work, background work, all of it. So what are some of the challenges that come in the way of a photographer, of a CEO that you have, the roles you currently have?
Yeah. So just for the sake of your listeners, I'd like to talk about wildlife photography before we discuss this, because
Sure.
it's directly related to it. There are two kinds of wildlife photographers. One who do assignments.
Right.
So that is a very negligible amount of wildlife photographers.
Sure.
When you say assignments, let's say Nat Geo says, I want you to work 3 months in the Himalayas to photograph snow leopards, is an assignment.
Yeah.
Versus somebody like me, In 3 months, we would be in 3 continents. We'll
Right.
be in the South America tomorrow, looking at pumas. Next month, I'll be in Madhya Pradesh looking at tigers. The month after that, I'm in Svalbard, for example. What I do is I have used my wildlife photography skills and figured my market
Yeah.
of photo enthusiasts, and I've married the need for them to travel and do photography and learn with my skills.
Sure.
To be very honest, when I was 26, 27, when I won awards in wildlife photography, and I was about to move out of the IT and get into wildlife photography, very soon I realized I wouldn't be able to just travel and click pictures and make a living.
Yeah.
That is what people think a wildlife photographer does.
Yeah.
That's not true. So I realized I know how to click good pictures. I have a lot of knowledge. I am a good trainer. How do I make a career out of this? And the answer was, who needs these kind of skills, right?
Right.
Probably the world of photo enthusiasts were growing during the time.
Yeah.
And digital photography was just about 5 years old. So I realized there was a market which was erupting. And I realized if I just want to click pictures and make a living by clicking pictures, I wouldn't be able to do so because there was no demand for as many pictures because there
Sure.
were so many people picking up cameras and producing content
Right.
that monetizing a photo was becoming tougher and tougher because there
Sure.
was more supply and diminishing demand.
Right.
So then, how do I make a living out of my skills? The easier answer was there was this growing enthusiast community who needed the guidance and probably hand holding and the support, which is why we called ourselves Toehold,
Right.
because that is what we do. We let
Yeah.
people climb on us and climb the summit.
Right.
And that was a good, I mean, if I want to do something like that today, it may be very tough
Yeah.
because that was the timing when the market was growing and
Right.
we kind of created this service where people joined us, learned from us, traveled the world. They didn't have to go through the same learning curve somebody like me had to go through
Yeah.
because there was nobody to guide us. But that is why I realized I'll marry the prospect of business with my skills.
Yep.
And I think we created an opportunity for ourselves. So I do not click pictures and sell them and make a living as
Yep.
much as I make people click pictures and enjoy their work.
Sure.
So that important realization will be needed for somebody interested in doing what I do.
Right. And there's a great lesson for people out there is that great skill isn't just good enough.
Hmm.
You need to find a niche, you need to find a business use case, a rationale, whatever,
Right.
which is what you have managed to do,
Right.
which is fantastic. So keep that in mind. It's just not good enough to have or great enough to have skills.
Right.
That's-
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There needs to be somebody to buy your service.
Yeah.
And since a lot more people click pictures for fun and for a hobby, one thing I ask people, many people ask me, how do I become a wildlife photographer? I want them to answer a couple of questions. The first question is, have you ever bought a photograph? Is the first question I ask.
Right.
Almost nobody has ever bought a photograph. Then I
Yeah.
ask them, who do you think buys a photograph? Then they take 5 minutes and start realizing a few things they should have realized before.
Yeah.
And then they probably say, maybe magazines, maybe this, maybe that. The answer is maybe. Nobody knows for sure.
Right.
There are these exceptional, art collectors who may pay 25,000 for a photograph or 50,000 for a celebrated photographer and do that. But that is not norm. That's an exception.
Yeah.
Now, when people realize nobody is buying photos, then I ask them, what do you plan to do creating these photos? That's when the dots keep connecting and they'll start asking more questions and
Yeah.
they'll realize they have been kind of in a delusion about this. And I explain to them that wildlife photography. So here's the thing. If you think about it, when you say a UX designer or
Yeah.
when you say a doctor or a surgeon,
Right.
we hardly find a hobby surgeon.
Yeah.
We hardly find a hobby UX designer. Maybe there are some, but to an extent, when you say I'm a UX designer, it's a given that you practice UX design and you make a living. When you say you're a doctor, it's a given that you practice medicine or you practice treating people and you get paid for it.
Yeah.
But it's not the case with photography. When
Yeah.
you say I'm a photographer, a lot of people use the doctor's way of life and think a photographer makes a living clicking pictures. But
Sure.
what the person is saying is he clicks pictures. That's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that's a means of livelihood. That's something which gives them their bread and butter necessarily. It
Right.
means they click pictures. They may be very good at it,
Yep.
but that doesn't mean that's their source of income.
Totally.
So many people need to realize that. And once they do, it's important to know what genres of photography are conducive for earning a livelihood, what seems like an alternative interest.
Right.
And that's when people realize a lot of things about this career role as a wildlife photographer. And I'm happy to share more insights about it.
No, that's fantastic. And then I think we all know doctors who do photography
Right.
for a hobby.
Right.
but
Absolutely.
not for a living.
In fact, in my analytics, it's about
Yeah.
12% of my customer base.
Oh, wow.
Doctors
Right.
who do photography.
Right.
Right.
So, a natural extension to the earlier question, Jayanth, what are the top 3 traits that someone needs to have in order to succeed in wildlife photography?
Awesome. So I think the number one ingredient is passion and empathy for nature.
Right.
Because if that is not there, then it's not going to be long lasting, because it comes with a lot of not so great things about this endeavor, that if you don't have that passion and empathy and that interest in nature and wildlife, you won't last long. That's
Yep.
the number one. Number two is a lot of technical know-how, because you may be in situations where you have to react fast, make your pictures in a fraction of a second. The tiger won't wait for you and stuff like that. So knowledge of photography, that is the art and science of photography, is very
Yep.
important. And the most important, and what I think is where most people lack, is a rationale and business acumen.
Right.
Even if you are just a freelance photographer, you need to have the business acumen. That
Yeah.
is where a lot of people don't think they need to hone their skills, or they need to hone their knowledge of business or whatever. They
Yeah.
are very creative and they're very interested in all of those things, but they don't want to discuss money matters. They don't want to discuss business. They kind of, because creative people are anyway averse to talking about finance and money
Yeah.
and all of that. To be a successful wildlife photographer, or for that matter, any photographer,
Yeah.
knowing the business of photography
Right.
is probably very important and the least spoken about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And going back to your first point on passion, I know what you mean, because I think the first and the second point are so intricately connected.
Right.
Because you might be waiting for days, getting bitten by mosquitoes, and if you don't have the passion,
Right.
you won't be able to survive.
Sure.
And the second is you probably have a few seconds
Right.
at the end of 3 days to
Right.
click that amazing picture.
Absolutely.
So-
So it should become second nature.
Right.
You shouldn't think what to do. Things should happen. And that
Right.
happens only when you are training regularly. It's
Right.
like Sachin is batting. There's a fast ball coming from, let's say Wakar Yunis. Sachin doesn't have the time to think, what should I do? His reflexes, his muscle memory have been trained to react in a certain way, and that's a 6 or a 4 or a defense. That is not something you can think and do. It has to
Sure.
become second nature.
Yeah.
Likewise, as a photographer, some things are creative and some things can be made more creative because of the technology, understanding, because of the science of photography
Right.
falling in place. Because there are so many things now, and if you don't use all of these things together, you can't reach that creative output. Because in
Yeah.
your mind, you want some creative stuff, but the science is so lacking that you cannot
Right.
do the right things in order to get that creative output.
Sure. So now comes the $1 million question. How do you make money being a wildlife photographer?
Right. So there are many different things that people are doing. Predominantly, what I'm saying is very interesting. Most wildlife photographers do not make money selling their pictures. And when it comes to photography also, it's very important for youngsters to realize, people think, what does a photographer produce? Photos. What does a photographer sell? Photos.
Right.
It's wrong. A photographer sells his time. A photographer sells his services. And what happens in that service is creation of photos.
Yep.
For example, that is a realization most people should have. They should not sell photos. They should sell their time and service. If they can
Right.
think about, then who needs my service, who needs my time, then the answer is very simple. So a lot of wildlife photographers, probably in my estimate, about 98% of the wildlife photographers, when I say wildlife photographer, somebody who captures wildlife in a camera, is not earning money out of it. They're
Right.
earning a lot more than money, which is satisfaction, pleasure, positive energy. They are using it to, get a work-life balance. They're going to get out of their mundane careers and do something interesting. People have to understand those are also remunerations.
Sure.
A lot of us just look at remuneration as money.
Yeah.
But a lot of wildlife photographers earn a pride, earn social media glory, earn a lot of these things,
Yeah.
and not just money.
True.
People who look at it just as a money making venture will realize that it's a tough endeavor to be in. So a lot of wildlife photographers earn in different forms.
Yeah.
Once you earn social media glory, then you earn more from endorsements and influence and stuff like that than the beautiful photo that you have.
Sure.
So today, who needs wildlife photos? Let's say magazines. We all know the print magazines are dying. They're really not doing well.
Yeah.
The way they survive is perhaps on sponsors and advertisements. So they are themselves running on ads. So what are the chances of some magazine paying Jayanth, let's say, 10,000 rupees to buy a photograph? Zero chance. So they would pay 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000. That is what we can call as honorarium,
Yeah.
rather than the cost of my photograph. That is just to have some respectable transaction.
Yeah.
But that is not enough for you to even buy a memory card. Forget go to the Arctic and capture polar bears.
Right.
Right? So wildlife photographers don't sell photos predominantly. There are some who sell stock images.
Right.
Now, you can say there are people who are selling stock images, but then if you go to a website like Getty, or if you go to another website like stock websites where you
Right.
buy and sell images, people buy images by 200, 300, 400, 500 rupees.
Sure.
So who are buying these images? Let's say there is a resort in Kabini who wants to promote wildlife tourism. So they need a tiger with a vehicle trailing the tiger, kind of an image to promote tiger tourism, for example.
Right. Mhm.
Now that resort will pay 2,000 rupees to obtain that photograph. And people who are capturing such photographs will upload pictures by thousands and thousands. And if you look at that as a business alone, it doesn't make sense.
True.
Because you are buying cameras worth 5, 6, 7, 8 lakhs. You're traveling to wildlife resorts, spending 20, 30,000 a day. And what you capture is not proportionate to your investment. So that's
True.
not even a business.
Yeah.
So what happens in wildlife photography is somebody who says, hey, I got 3,000 rupees for my image, and people celebrate that. But if you look at it from a business, if you look at it from a profit and loss perspective,
Sure.
that
Mhm.
is beyond even imagination, such a big loss.
Yeah.
But since people don't look at it as a business, they do not look at the investment. They look at it from, my image was sold. More than the money, the pride is what they're earning.
Yep.
The fact that somebody used your image is a proud thing for somebody. So that is the story of wildlife photography. A lot more, supply than the demand, because of
Right.
which the value is decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. But this is monetary value. But
Yep.
the value of positivity, the value of feeling good, the value of creation, and all of that is really high,
Yep.
which is what the world needs. And that's why somebody like me realized, I don't want to click my pictures and try and find people who can buy it. I will make people click pictures and give them that happiness that they are doing this for,
Yep.
and they'll pay me for that happiness.
Sure. Yeah.
So that is what people like me do. Very few people are hired by organizations like the most famous Nat Geos of the world, where they are commissioned to send to a place and they spend
Yeah.
2-3 months there and produce photos or stories or documentaries and stuff like that and come back. Just for people to know, it's a very sexy job, but it comes with a lot of hard work. And also imagine if I tell somebody to spend 3 months in Spiti Valley to come up with 15 photographs that I'll use on a Nat Geo story, it's not as interesting as I'll send you this month to Africa, next month to Spiti Valley, the month after that to Arctic, and after that you'll go to South America. That is more exciting to people.
True. Yeah.
So even in wildlife photography, if you are spending 2.5-3 months to produce 10 pictures, the same thing happens to you. You get bored, you're not
Yep.
getting the creative variety in your life and stuff like that. So
Sure.
that is what a lot of commissioned photographers do. But then it's not fixed income. You may have a commissioned job this quarter. Next quarter, you may be looking around for work. Next year, you may get something else and stuff like that. Those are freelanced commissioned photographers
Right.
who are very, very few. Remember, the market has a very little demand and there's a huge amount of supply. As a business, let's say I am running a magazine like Nat Geo, I would want to procure images spending the least amount of money to make my bottom lines a lot healthier.
Absolutely.
Rather than sending somebody to Spiti for spending on their flight, spending on their accommodation, their per day fees, giving them the camera gear, paying for the permits, paying for the guide, paying for the car, the fuel, the food, it's a lot of investment.
True. Yeah.
Only a few organizations feel the need to do that, and they get very well funded. That is why the number of people who can do commissioned work is very less. And with the commissioned work also, there's a lot of things which are not attractive. You have to be in a budget. You're also, here's the thing I tell people. Let's say you are hired by NatJet today and you're sent to Spiti Valley, and you get a brief from the director saying, I want these pictures,
Right.
which is not the same as you going to some place and you creating whatever you want. To an extent, there is an outline, and it's the same as any other job. There is a direction. You have to work in some, a perimeter set for you, and within that you can do whatever creative you can.
True.
Which is the same in photography as well. It's not like, beta, you go to Spiti, in 2 months create whatever you want, come back, we'll publish your stuff. It's not the way it works.
Right.
So every industry is the same. If you look at it that way.
Totally.
There will be an outline. There will be a boundary within which you can work.
Sure.
So this is what wildlife photographers do. Some people who are celebrated wildlife photographers can sell pictures as fine art prints.
Right.
Like the MF Hussains in the painting world. If you look at it, in my analysis, a lot of artists are nearly broke. Very few artists really make a lot of money,
Sure.
which is similar in wildlife photography as well. Because they are so very passionate about just creating art that they don't have the business acumen. They don't know how to find customers. They don't know how to sell. They don't know how to market.
Yeah.
Likewise in wildlife photography.
Sure.
People enjoy their subject so much that they don't even think who is going to buy what I'm creating.
Right.
I can tell you this. Let's say somebody is given an option to photograph a hummingbird on a flower versus a tiger hunting. If you ask any wildlife enthusiast, I have 2 options for you. Today morning, I'll bless you with either of them. Choose. Most people will say tiger hunting. That's
Right.
so exciting, right?
Yeah.
But that's the least sold kind of a photo. What will be sold is a hummingbird on a flower because that's a pleasant sight. You'd like a photo like that in your drawing room or on your dining table, rather than a tiger pouncing on a deer and holding it and biting it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if you look at being rational as a photographer,
Right.
you are supposed to produce pictures for a customer who is willing to pay, right? So a lot of people say, I'm excited about wildlife photography because I love the tiger, I love the adrenaline and all of that. They don't understand there's no market for that.
Sure.
So it's an example to tell you that even in wildlife photography, you have a paymaster, and according to the paymaster's interests and what they want to pay for, you need to produce stuff, which may not always be matching your interests.
True.
So it's just like software also, right?
Yeah.
You want to do something, but the demand from the company is something else, and you have to cater to that demand because they are going to pay for you.
Yeah.
That realization is important for photographers.
True. No, that's very well said, Jayanth. And I think this is one thing that people don't, especially people with skills, with that whole kind of feeling of wanting to create and change the world and do something better. All that is great, and which is what you said. And I think, but on the other hand, there's that commercial viability, as we call it. You don't want to be ending up as a starving artist
Right.
at the other end. No, great balance out there. On that note, Jayanth, society has a certain set checklist of what success means. What does success mean to you?
Well, it's an evolving definition for me.
Right.
When I quit my job and I started getting into photography full time, the definition of success was to replace my IT salary.
Okay.
And I couldn't see far. The biggest goal back then was just to earn a similar livelihood like I was doing in IT industry. And I was so kind of not so smart. It happened very soon. It happened in a few months.
Okay.
So then what's the next definition of success? Then I decided that I learned stuff that being a photographer, I would not be able to scale.
Right.
So my definition from then changed towards becoming an entrepreneur. While people know me as a photographer, I think I'm more of an entrepreneur who wears the facade of a photographer.
Right.
Because I wouldn't be as successful as I want to be if I'm just a photographer. Because I am in one place at one time. There's a scale issue.
Yeah.
I cannot replicate myself. And what others create is not mine in that case. So
True.
I decided my success would be creating a Toehold and scaling it as a business. And last 14 years, that is what I've been doing, evolving.
Right.
And my definition of success has been evolving. Today, if you ask me what is Toehold's definition of success, it'll be different from what it used to be 10 years ago.
Right.
And I would keep evolving in that, I think, because
True.
the point is we meet that definition of success and then we come up with a larger goal and we keep evolving.
Yeah.
As of now, I do not think I'll ever be successful.
Right.
I'll only be redefining it and trying to achieve it, and keep going to different, as I said, definitions of success. But if you ask me, making an organization that lasts beyond my lifetime
Yep.
is my definition of success at the moment,
Sure.
because that is tangible. That's also something which, if you look at my profession, it involves a lot of physical activity, right? I
Right.
need to dive. I mean, I realized how weak I am when I was in the water with killer whales. I had to jump into the water, and the whales pass you, and again you have to come into the boat, and again go to the next spot where the whales are coming. You have to jump in there, and if the whales turn, you're done. Again, go into the boat, again move. It requires a lot of physical
True.
effort.
Yeah.
So now I cannot have the same kind of physical fitness, or the output cannot be the same. Like, I'm in my 40s now, it cannot be the same in my 50s. It definitely cannot be in my 60s.
Right.
So how am I going to be in my 50s is a question I ask myself. I've asked myself in the 30s as well. So as long as I evolve to a stage where I don't necessarily have to click pictures, I don't mind my personal brand not being the same in 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I want that to evolve to become an entrepreneur as a personal brand.
Right.
Today, it's a photographer as a personal brand. I would like Toehold to scale to an extent where someday they'll say our founder was Jayanth, but today we are working without him.
Yeah.
That would be really a definition of success for me. And I should head there in less than 10 years if I have to realize it.
Sure.
I have done all the right things already to set up a brand, to set up a company, to have all the ingredients to scale it.
Yeah.
But I still haven't been successful in scaling it to the levels I want. Of course, things like COVID didn't help. But in, let's say, 5 years' time, we have a nationwide presence with multiple people working. And so let me answer your question in a short answer.
Yeah.
The day Toehold becomes bigger than Giant, it is a success for me.
Excellent. So you become no longer the creator, you are the catalyst now.
Exactly.
Kind of, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Excellent. That's great. Any advice, any suggestions for people who are going to be entering this field, or they're going to say that I will follow in the footsteps of people like Jayanth?
Mm-hmm. Right. I think doing this early in your life is very important. I see a lot of people who attend my workshops in their 30s, some in their late 40s, who have been group heads of Wipro, for example, who say, I want to quit I want to quit IT and become a photographer. And that is where I have curated a course called Photography Pathfinder, where they need to hear the realities, which they wouldn't know at all.
Right.
They will see Jayanth getting down from a SUV and they'll think, that is the lifestyle of a wildlife photographer. They do not know the business aspect of it. They do not know the struggles. They do not know other things. I think the advice I'd like to give people is do it in your early 20s, because then you're not comparing a livelihood to an IT CTC. Like, let's say you're 21 and you're an intern in a wildlife photographer's office, and your expectation is not like, once I'm out of Infosys, I get a 5 lakhs per annum. CTC kind of a perspective is not the same.
Right.
Once you are already in Infosys or in Wipro or in Accenture and the likes, you're talking about lakhs per annum CTC. And for you to do a successful shift is going to be nearly impossible, because you will not make money in the initial stages. And shifting without having a financial backup is very tough. Most people would not have that kind of financial backup in their 30s or 20s.
Right.
So shifting after a few years like I did is nearly impossible today.
Right.
Because I could do it because there was a first mover advantage. Even 3 idiots had not come and said Farhan Qureshi, wildlife photographer. Even that was not there when I did what I did.
Yeah.
Right? So today, it's already 15 years of this. A lot of people want to be. So the moment you see in the market a lot of people wanting to become something, it's already late.
Yeah.
It's already late. So I think
True.
today there are a lot of wildlife photographers who will be just happy to get their name in a magazine, forget about earning money.
Yep.
So my advice to youngsters is learn about the realities of economics, business, and all of that, and not just about the attractive things about wildlife photography.
Sure.
There will be some people who will make it their career, no matter what I say and what I do.
Right.
They are the ones who will really make it, because they are looking at things beyond just the flashy things.
Right.
But most people look at the flashy things without realizing the realities. And for them, it is going to be a rude shock. Because, as I said earlier before we started recording, wildlife photography is like hathi ke daat. Khane ke aur, dikhane ke aur.
Right.
You have to realize khane ka kya hai. And that is when you will be able to hone your skills to match that requirement. And if you can do that, you can really be successful as a wildlife photographer.
Fantastic. Great advice there, Jayanth. Jayanth, it's 2024, so there is that mandatory AI question that I have to pop in.
Right.
How do you think it will change the nature of wildlife photography?
I mean, to a large extent, it's already changing. It changes in multiple aspects. One is AI helps photographers capture things better. Like, for example, today we use AI in focusing. Earlier, let's say there's a tiger walking, you needed to move something called as an autofocus point on the tiger's face, and you had to focus and keep the autofocus point on the tiger's face while the tiger is moving. Today, you just have to tell the camera that in this area, wherever the tiger is, focus the eyes of the tiger. And the camera can pick up the eye and track the tiger's movement using AI. Its subject recognizes. You can tell the camera whether you're interested in an animal or a bird or an insect or a flight or a whatever, human or whatever. So there is AI already in the cameras itself,
Right.
which will help you produce pictures faster, more accurately, and stuff like that. There is also AI in post-production, like we use software like Lightroom, Photoshop, where AI is helping a lot. For example, in the earlier days, let's say I took a landscape photograph and I wanted to control the exposure on the sky. I
Right.
used to go through a painful selection using, let's say, a stylus or a mouse, doing it multiple times. I make a small mistake, I have to redo it and stuff like that. Today, one click, select sky. AI uses its intelligence and picks up the sky, picks up the subject. In the subject, you can pick up the lips. So it's become so useful
Sure. Mhm.
for photographers to first produce their work.
Right.
Now, there's also a perspective where we don't even need photographers. There is AI, which is so advanced now that you just need a prompt, and instead of going to the Arctic and producing a photo of a polar bear, spending 10 days and $10,000 is like now a monthly subscription to a Mid Journey or a Fire, whatever that is, and it's become so easy for people to get images as well. So the whole aspect of supply and demand gets skewed even more.
True.
So
yeah.
now we had a little demand, and even there's AI coming and supplying stuff.
Yeah.
So the photographers monetizing opportunities keep going lesser and lesser.
Right.
So that brings us to a point where what kind of photos should photographers create? Then that's an interesting question. Can you create something that is a part of history, that is a part of something which has happened, which is not, it has its own authentic reasons to capture that photograph?
Sure.
For example, let's say the Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus attack on November 2008. You captured the so-called terrorist holding a gun and walking. That photo, when you put it on a Times of India to narrate that story, versus put an AI-generated image to narrate that story, the impact is different.
Totally.
So there is still a lot of scope for creating images which were actually real incidents versus creating images for website brochures or for headers of your emailer and stuff like that, which is not documentation.
Yeah.
But you can create that using AI today. So today, photographers are evolving to understand what kind of photos they need to create, what kind of photos intelligence will create,
Yeah.
and how do they still be relevant. So that is something which photographers are learning to evolve, and they have to soon realize what is their role right now. If they're
Yeah.
going to create something somebody can type in and get a picture in 5 seconds, their role is redundant. We know a lot of people in graphic design. I'm sure you know how
Yep.
certain things have become redundant,
Totally.
and AI is taking over some responsibilities there. We know a lot of people who have been struggling with their jobs and stuff like that, right? So likewise in photography as well.
Yeah.
AI will disrupt a lot of mundane work. So photographers have to evolve and figure out how they can still be relevant. So in my case, it's relatively easy. My customers will never get the thrill of typing a prompt and seeing a picture and putting it on Instagram.
Yeah.
My customers will get the thrill by actually doing it. So for
Yep.
me, it's relatively easier.
Totally.
But if I was a magazine editor where I need to write a story on climate change, I need to get an image of an iceberg, and I can prompt AI and get that image, I will use it because I'm not saying this was shot in the Arctic. I'm not proving that to be a document
Yep.
which was a reality.
Right.
So each wildlife photographer or each photographer's role will evolve now.
Sure.
And there's no question that is AI good or bad kind of a debate is not even there now.
Yeah.
It's going to be there. It's going to evolve. It's going to make your role more and more redundant. So maybe, I'm imagining as we speak, tomorrow's definition of a photographer could be somebody who can prompt very well,
Right. Yeah.
right? So we are using a camera and clicking a button now. There we are typing on a keyboard and clicking the mouse button, and the skills could be evolving accordingly. So even
Totally.
prompting is an important skill, I've realized.
True. Yeah.
Anybody cannot get the output from AI just like that, right?
True.
So that is a skill which I think photographers also will evolve with. So we'll work with naturally created images, we'll work with artificially intelligence created images.
Yeah.
We have to coexist and learn to be relevant even with. So as I keep saying, AI is going to always support you. You have to treat that as a capable employee of yours.
Yeah.
Delegate the tasks which AI can do well. You do the things that you have to do, and you have to have relevant role in this ecosystem.
Sure.
So we have to evolve. That is the only thing.
No, I think there's some great pointers out there. And I think you spoke about climate change. And I remember this image, I think it was shot somewhere in that Raja Ampath area
Mhm.
overall, where a shark's fin had been cut off.
Right. Mhm.
And it had been left as it is.
Right.
And obviously it could not swim and it would die eventually.
Right.
And it was a moment in time. I mean,
Mhm.
someone had captured it, it was struggling, it was probably a video and then a series of shots. And that sparked a whole outrage and debate on climate change and, over tourism and all sorts of things. Now
Right.
that is an image that you can probably not even imagine. You have
Right.
to see it
Right.
to understand what is happening to our world. And as
Sure.
wildlife photographers, you got the front seat
Right.
to actually seeing the change and
True.
what we are doing
Absolutely.
overall. But yeah, I think what you mentioned in terms of AI being a capable employee
Mhm.
is it resonates so very well.
True.
Kind of, yeah.
True.
Great. It's very interesting, Jayanth. I think with that, we shall come to the last question, though I'm sure we'll keep having this conversation and I'll keep asking you questions as they come from people who are listening. The question for you is, what advice would you give to 19-year-old Jayanth Sharma?
Okay. Well, I think if I would have gotten into what I'm doing now a little earlier, I would probably be at a much better stage than what I am right now. So I did this when I was 27, 28. So if some 19-year-old can realize what they want to do, at 19 I didn't know what I was interested in doing to an extent like I was at 27. So realizing early is probably something I would have loved to have. Um, but that apart, I think that is why we are supposed to be a teenager and enjoy doing everything, I think.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to focus on a few things which I have not done well in my life, like be it finance or health and stuff like that. I would have loved to have a mentor and done a little better in those aspects. But you can't have it all. I did very well in creative stuffs. I was not financially as literate as I wanted to be,
Right.
and that I realized only in my late 20s and early 30s. Imagine, I think what I feel schools can do better is inculcate a lot of knowledge in students, like for example plastic pollution, for example, or
Yeah.
environment issues, climate change, these kind of issues. We were never exposed to these things when we were in school,
Right.
but today schools are talking about it.
Yeah.
Personal finance is a topic that I never heard from my teachers or in school. Today I think teenagers and kids are hearing about it. They are understanding from influencers how to do SIPs and how to do this and that and all of that. So I
Exactly.
think it'll be a little harsh to change the past based on today's trends,
Yeah.
but I would have loved to be a little more wise financially, health wise, and all of that. But otherwise, I went on an amazing journey and I would probably not change much of it. I think I've enjoyed everything from some of the personal incidents. Like, for example, I don't know if you know my accident and my finger, all those were when I was 19.
Okay. So what's
And
that story?
so it's just basically an accident on a machine while I was in college,
Right.
which changed the trajectory of my life. Back then, it was like a disaster, but I look at it as a blessing in disguise. So I think nothing is something I would like to change. I would have loved to, be a little more wiser with respect to the aspects I mentioned, but otherwise, I've been fortunate to have a life like this so far.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing insights from your life, Jayanth. I think it has been an absolute delight and pleasure having you here on AltC. I'm sure people who are listening out there would take away a lot from your experiences. And even though sometimes we have to make those mistakes ourselves,
Mhm.
I think it'll be helpful when they hear your stories and the stories of other people and how to avoid something or how to sort of go or aspire for certain things, certain greater things overall.
Right.
So thank you so much. And we will hear more stories from more people, real lived stories, real lived lives, mistakes, achievements, accomplishments on AltC with JD. So tune in to the next episode. See you soon. Stay hungry, stay curious. Thank you.